Okay. It's so good to see you guys here. I have made the joke over the years that one of my brands is that I paint myself into corners and then I film myself getting back out. That's what this keynote is going to be today, because I have to open with a mea culpa. Astronaut Cady Coleman is one of my heroes, and I'm lucky to say she's one of my friends. And I called her 4 months ago and said, would you come and appear at SiliCon? And she said, absolutely, I would love to. And then she called me on Friday and said, hey, about the keynote address on Saturday. And I said, yeah. And she said, nobody has yet called me since your first call 4 months ago. And I said, oh, really? And she said, look, I want to do whatever it takes to help this work for you, which is honestly one of the most amazing reactions I have ever heard from a fellow human, and I guess that's why she's an astronaut. And I wanted to explain the reason that we're bringing Cady Coleman here is not just because she's the co-host of the Mission Interplanetary podcast, or that she works with MIT on space initiatives, or that she's the global explorer for Arizona State because she's been in space for 6 months on the ISS. No, we've brought her here because of what we think is her unique perspective on what we've all gone through over the last 18 months. Because what have we dealt with? We've dealt with distance from our loved ones, a delay that hinders the intimacy. We've dealt with close quarters, which even with your loved ones is a mixed bag. and also the danger, the actual very real danger. And all of these are a perfect description, a perfect job description for an astronaut. Now, look, there's a lot of reasons that Cady might not have gotten a call. We might have sent the email to the wrong address. I said we might have sent the email to the wrong address. Thank you. Thank you for the tired dad joke laugh. If you were surprised, then you haven't been paying attention. Before we bring her out, I want to show a little inspirational video, so can we roll the NASA video? We brought her here using some really unique technology. Please welcome Cady Coleman. Here she comes from the back. Come on up. Now, Cady, I so appreciate you wearing this spacesuit. I'm curious, what is your favorite part about wearing a spacesuit?
Well, I'd say it's the fact that I get to be in space and really live there and still be able to free.
Before we continue, can you lift the visor? Can we see your lovely face?
Well, first can I just take you to space for just a minute?
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to tell you, because I think it's important for people to understand how amazing it is to live in space. To wake up in the morning, open your cabin door, fly down the laboratory, hook a right, go into the module where there's the treadmill, time to run? No running right now, no. But then, fly by the bathroom, yes, even the bathroom, and then up into the cupola, where you get to see everybody else on Earth but you. And I think that's what we're here to talk to. So, if you want the visor up, I would love to do that for you, but I can't.
How come?
Because I'm in Massachusetts. Like, really.
Cady Coleman, everybody, still in Massachusetts.
Hello. And we're going to be about our space twin, Mary Robinette Kowel. You know, that's looking great on you, Mary Robinette. And I feel like we are space sisters because we've talked about spacesuits a lot.
Have a seat, Mary Robinette.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, author, actress, award-winning author of the Lady Astronaut series, recent president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, and puppeteer Mary Robinette Cowel.
You know, both of you are looking pretty good in those suits there.
You know what? I'm sweating balls, but I feel so happy right now.
Yeah, I am not sweating balls, but I am sweating boobs, and they are, I am also equally happy.
Well, welcome to Astronaut Land, I have to say. None of those suits are breathable or all that comfy, but they look good.
I was saying to Mary Robinette before I walked out, I'm like, what are you wearing? I'm wearing a quilt that I made.
I'm wearing a quilt that you made.
Cady, I am curious if all of those things that we've gone through in COVID, the distance, the delay, the lack of connection, did your time in space make COVID, do you think, easier for you in some ways than most people?
You know, in some ways it made me feel a little validated, I have to say. I had a commuting relationship for 26 years, married, right? And people would be like, don't you miss having a real one? And, and I was like, well, you know, it's actually working for us. So in some ways I felt validated, but I have to say that, you know, being up in space away from everybody that you love, and when things happen on Earth, whether it's that your kid can't find something that only you knew where it was, or something more important than that happens, which does happen, it's hard to be far away. And so what gets you through that was, for me, realizing that the mission was the most important thing, that you know, that I was up there to do something really important, and if I kept doing that, then that would get me through. And for me, the translation of COVID was, you know, sometimes the mission is not, it may be hard, but it's simple. Sometimes the mission is to keep yourself safe and everyone around you as safe as you can, and sometimes that means simply staying home or doing things that, you know, you wish you didn't have to do, like wear a mask. I mean, sometimes knowing what the mission was keeping everybody safe, helped me do that.
I mean, I know that so many of us, I made the joke that being in close quarters with your loved ones can be a mixed bag. I've been flying around the world for a week per month for my entire marriage until 2020. And it was a real adjustment. I am curious about, you know, again, in the validation department, I just want to hear about astronauts being cranky with each other on the ISS. That's what I really want to hear about. Like little bits of floating poo, and you know whose it is, and you're really pissed at them.
Okay, that did not happen on our shift.
Okay.
But I have heard that it is true on the ISS that one never eats a milk dud.
Oh, well, that's probably a very good idea. I mean, we did actually have a really funny time where the chief of the office, we hadn't had meetings with her in a long time, and then we started having meetings when we got a new crew up, and she said one day, she goes, so I'd like to talk about hygiene. I was like, well, she's not even up here. How does she know if anybody smells or not? Right? And she goes like, where do you like brush your teeth? Where do you like wash your hair? And it suddenly became clear. I had made a little video in the bathroom of washing my hair, and I had the camera in there, and I was going to do that. And as soon as I started, and I saw this big blob of water like heading toward the camera lens, I realized, oh, this is not the way to do this. So I like opened the door, moved the camera outside, did this stuff, but apparently this horrified the people on the ground, because I mean, they're looking, they're like, oh my God, free water all over the cabin, everywhere, electrocution, shorts, everything. So we were under hygiene watch, but it was for a different reason.
Years ago, a flight attendant that we worked with on Mythbusters told me that one of the new person initiation jobs on the plane for a flight attendant was they would have them go open the door of the plane after it landed. But they told the new person to make sure you put your hands on both sides of the opening as you were opening it. And it really was a ruse to get your face right up to the opening, because apparently when you first crack the door of an airplane, it smells like farts. I'm curious about landing after an ISS mission. Is there something similar? Or does the ISS smell like farts?
I'm going to say it depends on the crew. I was the clothes police. I was like, hey, you guys, it is that special day when we are all going to wear new gym clothes. And Paolo from Italy is like, what? I'm like, what? You know, Scott is like, really? I mean, I can get it so I can wear them for months. And I'm like, not on my watch.
Tell me if this is a true thing. I've heard that when you exercise on the ISS, that the sweat builds up on your body in a sheet, and if you move too quickly, that it comes off in kind of a bubble of sweat.
Personally verified, yes, especially if you're on the, I mean, there's not really wind, there's not really downwind, but somebody was in a hurry, they needed to go brush and do something, they forgot to turn something off, and they flew by, and there was just this, like, thing. Names will not be.
Oh, wow. Mary Robinette, as someone like me, who spent way more time than I have even positing what it might be like to be in space, I am curious if there were aspects of the last 18 months that resonated with the thinking that you've done.
So it's interesting because, like Cady, I have also had a lot of long-distance relationship going on, because I was coming out of being a touring puppeteer when I got married. And then, strangely, writers, it seems like we're going to sit at home a lot, and we mostly go to conventions and then write on the airplane. So my husband and I figured out that for the first 2 years that we were married, we spent about 8 months together. Oh, wow. And what I've been finding with COVID is that I was already prepared for a lot of things. I was prepared for the video calls. I was prepared for the lag. I was prepared for sending ephemera through the mail as a way to have contact. What I was not prepared for was staying home. And none of the skills that I had developed over the past 20 plus, my adult life, involved staying in one place. And relearning seasons. Like, I've only experienced seasons in jump cuts. Because
of travel.
Right. And so learning to reappreciate the things that are around me and to find the small differences, that's been a new and delightful thing. That comes from a really horrific circumstance. Like, I want to be clear that the reasons are terrible, but I've always felt like anything that you can come away with, I've learned one new thing, is still a net positive.
I'm also curious about the delay in communication. That has been a really unique and interesting difficulty, because it is so lovely to see our loved ones on a video chat. But the delay means that for any, I think, really substantive or emotional conversation, it's very difficult to attain some kind of interpersonal rhythm. And Cady, when you're on the ISS, it's an even bigger delay. What is it like to have interpersonal conversations with home, where it's like a second or two between each response, isn't it?
I think it's 4 seconds for you all, isn't it?
4 seconds?
Well, it varies. It kind of depends on what kind of little skipping across the pond the signal has to do around the Earth before it gets down there. So you don't know, and the fact that it's variable, actually, interesting thing, I think, is that for doing like telerobotic surgery or something very precise like that, they've realized that it's actually hard for surgeons on the ground to do that, because not because there's a delay, because humans can get used to a delay. It's that the delay changes as they're doing it. So that's hard. So that was an aside. There is this delay, and I know that my husband would take his the phone would ring and it would say U.S. government, and and he knew that this was me. Other people might be a little nervous, thinking about past actions, taxes, things like that. But he would know it was me. But other people, they answer this phone and they're sure it's something they don't really want, right? And so they go, hello, and you learn to just blurt everything out in one stream. I go, hi, it's Cady Coleman calling from the space station. And usually they're like, whoa, and you learn to sort of talk. We don't say over or anything like that, but you learn to kind of talk, get it out, and go back the other way. But one of the funniest times for me was I had taken some special books up there because my son was 10 at the time, and one of the ways that we just had in my training as we went around the world where you're not home and you're kind of having a not so much video, but a telephone life, because video phones were very new back then, right? So we're contacting on the phone, and one of the things that I did was read books and stories. And our favorite that we were reading was this Peter and the Starcatchers, written by Dave Barry, a really famous author, New York Times columnist, and also humorist. And then Ridley Pearson, children's book author. And they were books about smart girls, smart boys, fairy dust, sword fights, and everything a kid would want. And that's a long story to say that it just meant a lot to me. And I know I'm talking to people who write out there, and I'm talking to Mary Robinette, who creates worlds, and Adam, who does the same, and who clarifies worlds. That's the way I think of you, Adam. But it meant a lot to me as a mom to know that was kind of, that I was giving him that kind of world without even knowing it. So it meant a lot to me, especially when we were only halfway through one of the books when we launched, and I hadn't really accounted for that. I sent a book ahead, but I hadn't accounted for not finishing the one we had. And so I said, could you send me a PDF? So I was really thankful. So I wanted to call and thank them. And Dave Barry answers the phone, hello. And I go, Cady Coleman's, and he goes, great, can you hold on just a minute? And then he puts the phone down, and I hear him go, okay, so I will have a burger and fries, and he's ordering. And he goes, okay, so who was this? And I said, well, and I told him, and he goes, and I am at Johnny Rockets ordering a burger and fries. Maybe it's fitting, maybe it was rude, but it was fun.
You're reminding me, Cady, that the first time Chris Hadfield called me and Jamie, our office assistant, came into our office, and she said, guys, there's a person named Chris on the phone. He says he's calling from space. And I still, forever after, picture Chris Hadfield going,
But the thing that makes me think about Cady is the thing about having an asynchronous life. That you were doing your thing, Dave Barry was doing his thing, and you have this moment where they intersect in this communication. And that's, I think, the thing that a lot of us are having, is that we're having this asynchronous life, and it can sometimes feel like, why doesn't the other person understand the importance or gravity of the moment? And it's because they're ordering a burger at Johnny Rockets and they need to get the order in.
And this is
everyone has their own reality.
Yeah.
Right, and I feel like this is one of the singular graces of COVID, is a recognition that we're all just trying to maintain in our orbits. I noticed that there's a lot more open talk about comfort eating, which I gave into wholeheartedly over COVID, and it was only partially because I was living with my mom. But that way in which we give each other the space, so your reality is your reality and mine's mine, and if they intersect, that's great, and if they don't, that's also cool. I am curious, Cady, if your opening description of waking up on the ISS sounds so magical. I also imagine I would be probably nauseous a good portion of the time. But I'm curious if after a few months on the ISS, if there are parts of it you're like, I can't stand to look at this room anymore.
Not for me. No, not this room, not this space. I mean, it's hard to convey how magical it is up there, and I think it has to do with the flying from place to place that just gets to be normal and learning how to sort of send things to people. Wow. You know, and I mean, you just give things a little push, and then they, you know, and then they arrive, and you have to aim for the chest and not the eyes, because otherwise there's like little, you know, this baseball ball arc that doesn't happen, and also, you know, you're up there and you look down, you realize you're the only 6 people not on Earth. Everyone else is down there, and that actually you're on Earth. It's just, you're just further away. And so it's a really special place. I mean, it's really clear that you're like at the edge of where people can be, and that you're lucky to be one of those 6, and that you are discovering this world, discovering fun, discovering not fun, you know, figuring out how much bad food can people really eat. I mean, these are all important questions. And something that I really love is, you know, we try to tell stories, and we try to get out there and inspire kids and all those kinds of things. But what NASA can do, and even the contractors, is actually not enough. And it's one of the reasons why I really value places like Comic-Con, you know, like SiliCon, because it gathers people like yourselves. I mean, there's only so many of us that have been to the space station, and the way that line has worked is not really, if you look at the population of the planet, been all that fair, right? But it is the way it is. I mean, the planet's half women, and it's certainly not half women. You know, there's so many minorities and women and people of color, you know, haven't been yet. I mean, it's getting better. And yet, Mary Robinette Kowel, something that just meant the world to me, is the series that she created, where, first of all, not only do we get to, you know, in a way, look back and respect the people that got us here, in terms of Katherine Johnson. You know, we could actually show those slides if we wanted to. You want to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a couple of slides about Katherine Coleman Johnson. Actually, her maiden name is Coleman, believe it or not.
Oh wow. No relation.
Well, Mary Robinette, why don't you? Let me. Can you see them? I can't see whether the slides are up.
It is up. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got the slide of Katherine Johnson up. Do you want to tell about Katherine Johnson, since these are your slides? Katherine Johnson was, I have to say was, because she passed away just a few years ago, and the anniversary of her death was actually just I think yesterday or Thursday. But she is a mathematician who was the person, and part of the team, of course, but she was pivotal in understanding how to get people off of this planet, up into space, and back home again safely. And as I understand it, the story is true in the movie Hidden Figures, that this, when they had the big computers, and you know, IBM computers were starting, they were bigger than the room, and it was experimental to be using them. And John Glenn said to Mission Control, you know, I want those calculations to be verified by that woman, the smart one, before I'm getting on that rocket. And if you look at, you know, there she is, a woman of color in a sea of white guys with white shirts and skinny black ties. I mean, there is really nothing hidden about her, and yet we did not see her. And when I think about us going to space as a collective species, of being able to go, finding the technology, figuring things out, there's so many aspects to that. We're not going to be able to do it with a group of people who all look the same. And so the next slide shows her spaceship that was just recently named in her honor. It's a supply ship by Northrop Grumman Orbital Sciences. They name all their ships about people who were pivotal in paving the way to space. And Katherine is one of those people. And this is my favorite slide, this cartoon that we have next, that is, you know, just, I mean, all of us, we would call it being on the shoulders of giants, climbing the stairs that someone else has built. But I love this, and I also, it brings me right back to Mary Robinette, where, you know, not everyone is going to see, when they see one of 400 astronauts or 600 astronauts, they're probably not guaranteed to see someone that looks and feels like them. But Mary Robinette created a world of people like that. Do you want to elaborate, Mary Robinette? So first of all, I'm just gonna say that every time we talk about my Lady Astronaut novels and an actual Lady Astronaut is enthusiastic about them, my inner 8-year-old is just like, and I'm in a spacesuit while this is happening? Oh my God! So I start when I'm writing from the assumption that women, people of color, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+ folks were there, and that they were written out and erased. And so I go looking for them. That's the first thing I do. And with that, I found the women of Hidden Figures before the film came out. There's a great book called Rise of the Rocket Girls. And you realize how pivotal women have been in space from the beginning. Like well before we got off the planet. And how often men took credit for their work. And it's frustrating, and especially when it, still happens. Quick show of hands, any woman in here experience that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is exciting to be able to shift things a little bit. And Cady, one of the things that I think about is a story that you tell about the fact that it never occurred to you that you could be an astronaut until Sally Ride came to your college and talked about being an astronaut. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, and I think of that as, things like that. I mean, just going to a lecture, I mean, it really never occurred to me until I saw someone, and she sort of looked and felt a lot like me, short, dark hair, interested in science, clearly accomplished in science, and yet she had this adventure, amazing part of her job. And I didn't think, well, if she can do it, I can do it, but it did make me think, maybe this could be me. And what I think is important for everybody out there in the creative things that you do is not only is it the creative things, the products themselves, whether they're, animations or figures or songs or, the way that you communicate, a world to people. It's not only those things, but you yourself, when you go on social media and say, I made these things, and this part was hard for me. When you make yourself a real person to, out in public, I think it calls for sort of being brave and being open. You're brave enough to stand up and say, hey, this is me, and I just want to share what I'm doing. And all of us, you might think it's, I like, oh, Cady would share, she's an astronaut, but there's some music stuff that I have done where I'm not the most amazing musician on the planet. And at the same time, there was no other flute players up there. and it was a way to welcome more people to space.
Let's see that video.
Yeah, we have a flute video we can put up.
And I don't need to see these, you can just show them.
Thanks, Colonel Katherine Coleman in the International Space Station. We should remember that today's cosmonauts, scientists, and astronauts are still every bit the rocket heroes they were 50 years ago. So, from the cultural city of Perm in Russia, let's salute Cady, Dima, and Paolo up there in orbit, and of course, the legendary Yuri Gagarin. Go safely.
So I should share that. So I brought, it's one of the ways you bring people with you on these amazing, ventures, is to bring things that other people care about. I brought flutes for a band called the Chieftains, a tin whistle and a flute for them, a wooden Irish flute. And then I brought Ian Anderson's flute because I loved what he did for bringing the flute to rock music. because it suddenly became a way for me to sort of listen and play. And I didn't know him, and in fact, I did not meet him until I got home from space. A friend of mine who's a DJ in Houston helped me find him and put us together by text. He got his flute, over to Houston in time to, be packed and go up to the space station. And then we had to figure out what we could do together that the NASA legal people would be okay with. And he wrote me this email, and this is where I think there's bravery involved. I mean, I didn't even know if he'd ever heard me play. He doesn't know if I could play worth anything, right? And he writes this note and he goes, what if you do this, and then I do this, and then you do this? And I didn't have much time up there, as you can imagine, and I looked at it for like 2 nights after. We'd only do this like after 11 at night. So I look at this and I'm like going, what is he talking about? I'm like, he talks about letters, but I don't see any letters in the music he sent. And I don't want to admit, like, I don't know anything about this, but I finally wrote him an email, and it was entitled Lost in Space. And I said, Ian, I just don't know what you want me to do. You've got to write it a different way. And he writes it back, and it worked out. And actually, I'm very proud of that video, although I was quite nervous when I made it. 2 takes and 1 take for dropping the flute. He wrote back, and when he wrote back to me, he goes, when I put your email it was up on the screen of my computer, well, sometimes I eat in the vicinity of my computer, and the screen was a little dirty, and there it was, a little spot right in the middle of your email, in the middle of Lost in Space. To me, it read Lust in Space. And I thought, how charming that she wrote to me when we've never even met. And then he concluded that there really weren't very many guys up there. Anyways, so it's just been a very fun relationship. But you have to have those candid conversations, and I think that, coming back to, what we're really all here about, which is kind of coming back to where we are, where we can be right now, during COVID, while it's still ongoing, is that, these are really hard conversations that we've been having as humans together that we've never had together in the past.
I think you're really right, Cady, about the courage. We all of us do so much self-gatekeeping. If you ask me if I play music, I say, yes, I play the guitar badly, and I will never play for you, is my standard response. And we do that, but nobody questions why you would be playing a flute in space, because it's so beautiful. And it's beautiful because in addition to being out there at the edge of the known, exploring and reporting back, you brought art, and you brought creativity, and you brought collaboration. And that is a clearly wonderful thing to do. There's no question about it, but you had more questions about it in your head than anybody watching it does.
Yeah, well, I'm running over Mary Robinette. I was just going to add to that each of us has those things to bring, and each of us has something that other people, can't bring to the picture, and it's just so needed. And yet it takes courage to stand up and say, hey, this is what I come with. And when I say this, I imagine in my head a Zoom screen with a bunch of faces on it. And maybe it's faces you've worked with a lot, and maybe it's new faces, but you're there together if it's kind of work or community organizing or whatever. You're there together with a purpose and a mission. And if you don't sort of find a way to connect with each other and help each other bring out what are those skills that you bring, then, we're lost. We are less without helping each other be more. I know that sounds kind of,
No, that's the whole point of this entire thing. Oh, wow, what is that? Hold on. I guess that's a part I don't need. I wanted
No, I'm sorry that you're losing your boning.
I'm deboned. I want to talk about empathy, because while I talked about our mea culpa at the opening of this, the fact is on Thursday afternoon, I was dealing with SiliCon stuff and getting my shop packed up and getting some stuff down here, and it was, it's been a stressful week getting ready for this, and I took a nap in the middle of the day, and I woke up from the nap to the text from Cady saying, hey, I didn't know about this. And when I immediately called her, I will admit, I felt like such crap. Oh my God, I can't believe I have to call my friend and explain this ridiculous situation. And Cady, the generosity of your response. I want to tell you guys, not only did Cady say, Adam, listen, don't stress, we'll do whatever's necessary. What is best for the con, just let me know and I'll participate. You and Mary Robinette and I can figure something out. And then after we hung up, Cady texted me and said, and please, don't be too upset with whoever it turns out dropped that ball. Life is too short. I love you for that response, Cady. So we still have, I think, a little bit of a damaging cultural idea about astronauts being these perfect physical specimens who've been trained to go up and do these really difficult things. And I don't think that serves us very well. But what we don't talk about is the kind of personality that makes an astronaut. And I do feel like the program filters for the unflappable. Is that true, Cady?
I'm guessing from the long silence, the answer is no.
No, I think so. Well, you know, everybody is unflappable about many things, but then there's something that they're flappable about.
Right.
And that's where you help each other, I think. And I don't know, you know, in terms of, you know, exploring and with NASA and the government, I mean, the government can take risks that no one else can take. And at the same time, these partnerships with our commercial partners have really, you know, it's a really marvelous thing that adds. It doesn't, you know, maybe there's detractions, but it really doesn't detract. I used to joke around, I was in charge of knitting together the mission controls and the astronauts for supply ships coming up with companies like SpaceX and Northrop Grumman. And I would say, you know, those SpaceX people, sometimes they make a decision and they don't even have a meeting. You know, and it would kind of inspire us, like, oh, maybe we should, like, you know, be a little more like, okay, can we all decide this together pretty directly? Let's do it, you know, kind of thing. And at the same time, you know, as the government, you have the public trust. And I will tell that, you know, I don't think anyone can imagine, in fact, I can't even, you know, I know what my bosses go through, I know what's happened to me sometimes, you know, the amount of scrutiny that goes on because these are public dollars. It really is very, very difficult. And so, you know, the government does its best, but now with these new collaborations and all these new astronauts coming this summer, I've been so happy to see different kinds of people, because to explore, we need actually lots of different kinds of people. And at the same time, when we're proving out new vehicles, that's where I think it's really, I mean, these people who are test pilots and engineers and navigators, they think in a different way that is really helpful for getting to the safest way you can get to a new vehicle in the quickest amount of time.
Cady, your first trip to space was the early 90s, 92 if I remember correctly, is that right?
Selected in 92, but first trip was in 95, kind of a, you know, sort of a forerunner. Here's my patch to the space station. If you look, we have the cupola in here. And so we were literally practicing, like, how are we going to do those experiments and not have the scientists on the ground kill each other because they all want theirs done now and they want to see it.
You've been doing this long enough where I'm wondering if some of the colleagues you ended up working with at NASA got their start because they were inspired by you.
I am old enough for that, yes. And very proud. Actually, you know, the daughter of a very good friend, you know, a guy used to be really encouraging to me when I was learning to fly, because, you know, everybody's nervous when they're learning to fly. And that was before I was an astronaut. And even, you know, to be filling out that application, you know, I'm somebody that needs that kind of, and I just do better when I recruit a team that, you know, gives me feedback, good and bad. And anyways, this guy who worked at basically controlled all the airplanes coming into Wright Pat, Dave Egner, he was really helpful. And his daughter wrote to me just today and just said, you know, it made a difference to me to have you, you know, in my, you know, someone I knew about when I was growing up. And so, but I think we should all realize that we all can be that somebody. It's not so much about being famous or getting to be famous. It's about the fact that you look at someone and you show them that you see them. Whether it's that you ask them what else they love to do, what they're nervous about, what flaps them, you know, but that you see them and you ask them how they are. And you know, we talked about this, that people, you know, how are you? that
Yes.
conversation has changed over COVID.
It really has. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but every waiter and waitress I've had for the past couple of months tells me their whole life story. We're all dying to talk to each other, and that's, when you say, Cady, about being seen, I think there's a way in which, look, I mean, to be real, if you're going to sequester with someone you love in a small environment, the first thing you have to do is raise the water level on what you give a crap about. And you have to give a crap about a lot less. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, one of the things when I was doing the research, and I can't remember which astronaut I was talking to, which is a delightful point to be in my life, I have to say.
Everybody loves to work with Mary Robinette. All of us are like, hey, can we help you? Do you need some facts? We might have them.
Like, yes, please. But one of them, I was asking about conflicts in space, and one of them said something to the effect of, you just couldn't afford to be mad at other people because you all depended on each other up there. And I feel like that's true down here, but we forget it, that we are all depending on each other. A puppeteer colleague of mine had just gotten a fancy TV job and managed to land me an audition. I was like, thank you so much, that was really nice of you to give me the audition. And he said that he felt like the first thing that you did when you climbed, when you went up a rung in the ladder, is that you reached down to help someone else come up with you. And then he said, but I also think that when you do that, if you have the resources to just build another ladder, you should build another ladder. And it's like, oh yeah, it's not just about helping people up the narrow path that you're on, but getting more ladders.
Oh my God, I love that.
I really love that.
Yeah, let's have a round of applause for building more ladders. And I'm actually going to connect it to this group here that's at this con. It is a self-selected group of celebrants of the things, the weird and wonderful things that reveal parts of ourselves to ourselves. Yeah, but one of the other things I love about this community is, again, the lack of gatekeeping. Oh, I love your costume. Really, you want to know how I made it? Yes, I do. Okay, I'm going to send you all the pictures. I remember early threads on the Replica Props forum where someone posted a beautiful Iron Man suit they built and then told everyone to screw off when we asked how it was built. And that is totally their prerogative, but they're in the wrong place, in my opinion.
Yeah. So in puppetry, one of the interesting things, there's a difference between American marionettes and European marionettes. European are a style called, we call them upright, but the control goes top to bottom and then there's a crossbar up here. And it was very closely guarded, handed down family to family, within a family, so you couldn't learn how these were built unless you married in. And a puppeteer named Paul McFarlane, way early on in American puppetry, or modern American puppetry, was like, I want to know how marionettes are done. Couldn't get anyone to tell him. So he went to shows and he lay down on the floor and he would watch the marionettes. He would get front row seats and then he would lie down and so he could look up. And so to him, the upright control looked horizontal. And he designed what we have as the airplane control, which is the crossbar that most people see. And then he told everybody how he did it. So all the American marionettists built crossbar controls because they all talk to each other. When you start looking at European marionettes, there's a lot of, this is a very specific style, and this is a very specific style, and this is a very different specific style. And I just think it's so much more interesting when we share knowledge. It's like, oh, you solved that problem? Cool. I can't solve this problem. Or I solved a different problem. Let's exchange.
The comedian Bill Hicks had this thing where he said, no one has the copyright on being you. And so if you're worried about someone stealing your joke in comedy, you're worrying about the wrong thing. If your joke is personal and it's really telling some truth about yourself, which is what comedy really is, then no one can steal it because it's wholly yours. And if they do, they're gonna get it wrong and you don't care.
Yeah, again, using puppetry, when we talk about voice, we talk about three different things. Mechanical, aesthetic, and personal. So mechanic is like literally what kind of puppet are you using? Is it a marionette? Is it a rod puppet? Aesthetic is, what does it look like? Does it look like a Muppet? Does it look like a hand-carved thing from the Appalachians? What does that look like? And then the personal is that if you hand the same puppet to two different puppeteers, it looks like a different character, which is why with Kermit the Frog, when Jim Henson died and Steve Whitmire took over, everybody freaks out because Kermit is just wrong. Even though he's obviously nailing the mechanic and aesthetic, because it's the same puppet. And Jim handpicked Steve. But all of the individual choices that he makes, his personal taste, all of that informs the choices that he makes as a performer. And that's the personal voice, and that's like, I teach writing, and I give the same writing prompt, which is a set of dialogue. And I have yet to have a student repeat a scenario to go around that dialogue. Every single person comes with their own unique story. And that's, like, you ask anyone to build a thing, and they're gonna come up with a totally different approach, totally different expression.
One of the last the last virtual workshop we did for SiliCon before this, we sent 45 people, and some of you are probably here in this room, a small box of humble materials. We were a little freaked out when we sent on that box. We're like, what? Well, I hope someone can build something. And what came out of it, there's a gallery that we've put up and linked to. What came out of that humble box of materials was 44 different executions of such magnificence. I was humbled. All of us on the SiliCon team were constantly sharing it. We talked about it, I think, for 3 weeks in the Monday meetings because it just made us weep every time. All these amazing executions.